Hello there, good evening. It's just gone 7 o'clock. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The number of people who've been killed in earthquakes that hit Turkey and Syria have risen to 33,000. Rescue workers are still searching through the rubble and they say the window for finding survivors is closing. But some people were found alive today, including a 9-year-old boy who spent almost a week under a collapsed building. An appeal by the UK's Disasters Emergency Committee has raised more than £60 million in just 3 days. The Labour Party is urging the BBC chair to consider his position after MPs found he breached standards when applying for the role. A cross-party committee says Richard Sharp made significant errors of judgment when he failed to declare that he'd helped Boris Johnson to secure a loan when he was Prime Minister. Shadow Culture Secretary Lucy Powell is questioning whether he's still able to uphold trust and independence in the broadcaster.
This damning report, it really is an unprecedented report, means that Mr Sharp's position is increasingly untenable, and he really should now reflect on whether he's able to carry out that very important role as the BBC chair to uphold public trust and independence of the BBC.
Warrington police have launched a murder investigation after a 16-year-old girl was found stabbed to death in Cheshire yesterday. Brianna Gay was found by members of the public with multiple stab wounds near Linear Park. Emergency services arrived, but she was pronounced dead at the scene. The force is looking to speak with 2 people described as a white man and woman. The chair of the Commons Defence Select Committee is urging Rishi Sunak to boost defence spending due to threats of a new Cold War. Tory MP Tobias Ellwood told GB News we need more money to replace military equipment and deal with aggression from Russia and China. It comes after reports that some NATO allies are concerned about the UK's military readiness. And a high-altitude object tracked over northern Canada that officials say posed a threat to civilian aircraft has been shot over the Yukon. It's the 3rd object to have been shot down over North America in the past week, which at least one top US lawmaker says is another suspected Chinese spy balloon. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says his forces will now recover and analyse the wreckage. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now, though, it's time for Free Speech Nation.
The new computer game Hogwarts Legacy causes mass hysteria among activists. A protest flares up at the Tate Britain over a drag queen, and God goes gender neutral. This is Free Speech Nation. Welcome to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. On tonight's show, I'm going to be talking to the barrister Sarah Phillimore, who is suing the ticketing website Eventbrite for removing an event on the grounds of her gender-critical beliefs. I'll also be meeting Samantha Presti, the comedian whose stand-up show has been cancelled because the venue does not approve of her opinions. I'll also be talking to Baroness Claire Fox about how the House of Lords has blocked the government's public order bill, which could represent a grave threat to the right to protest. And Toby Young will be joining me to discuss a new app that rewrites fairy tales to be more politically correct. My studio guests this evening are the wonderful Scott Capurro and Francis Foster. Welcome both. I like how you both dressed down for the occasion. It's really nice. But I like this because I can see your tattoos. I don't normally get to see them.
No, I normally try to hide them to guarantee work, Andrew.
OK. You've done that for me.
Yeah, exactly.
Very nice. And I don't mean that, Scott, because that's actually a very expensive top, isn't it?
It is. You can't afford it. It's actually, it's couture, Paul Smith.
Couture.
Yeah, it just arrived at my house one day. I don't know, it just did. So I thought I'd share it with you tonight. What do you think?
I think you look wonderful.
From the back?
Even better.
Thank you.
So let's start with some questions from our lovely audience. Our first question is from Heather. Where is Heather? Hi, Heather.
Hi. Is J.K. Rowling too powerful to be cancelled?
Yeah, so this week we've seen the release of Hogwarts Legacy, which is obviously this major video game adaptation of the whole sort of wizardy world created by J.K. Rowling. And if you've been online at all, you'll have seen the absolute insanity of activists and people are so angry about this computer game. There we can see a clip of what it looks like. It looks quite quite impressive, I would have thought. But people are very angry because they say that J.K. Rowling has expressed views that they don't like, and therefore anyone who plays the game is complicit in her evil, attempt to dominate the world. What on earth's going on? You like computers?
No, I just look like I do. There's a fundamental difference.
But this game, I mean, I don't know much about it.
Yeah.
I used to be into, back in Sonic the Hedgehog days.
Yes.
But this looks a bit more sophisticated than that.
It looks a lot more sophisticated than that. And to me, what I find really interesting, it's £60 to buy this game.
Is it?
Yes. So it's expensive, and in a cost of living crisis, that's even more expensive.
Yes.
But what some of these activists are doing, which I think is absolutely brilliant, is buying the computer game, trashing it, and then taking a photo of it and then uploading it to Twitter. And I'm like, you do realise she's got the money.
It's the principle, Francis. It's important that we resist it. Although it is apparently the most streamed computer game so far. It's hugely popular, in other words.
Because there's a lot of lonely people, that's why.
That's true.
I'm of two minds about J.K. Rowling, because, I support her desire to say what she likes. But the books are crap, so I don't know what I'm meant to do.
I actually haven't read the books, so I can't possibly comment.
I flipped through them, and I'm both jealous of her income and sad that that's how she writes. But the thing about her that's interesting, if you go to Edinburgh, where she hangs out and buys coffee and stuff, a lot of coffee shops don't want her to do business there.
There's actually a coffee shop that has a sign up saying this is not where J.K. Rowling sat to write the Harry Potter book. It's insane.
It is. It's on Broughton Street. I've been there. And they told me, it's not because of the books, or what she said is because she doesn't tip. I'm like, well, that's a reason to cancel her right there.
I don't believe that for a second. I mean, this is an odd one, isn't it? Because, again, we have to reiterate this because it seems so obvious, but because so many sort of major commentators get this wrong, let's just say it flat out. Rowling has never said anything transphobic or hateful against the trans community. That is a matter of fact. So we are now living in this weird, hysterical world where people have just decided that the opposite is true based on no evidence whatsoever, and they're going to get upset about a computer game. I mean, this is the definition of hysteria. I don't use that word lightly.
No, it is a definition of hysteria. One of the actors who had been involved with it came out and made a public apology for being in the computer game.
What?
Yes, one of the lead actors came out and made a public apology for being in a computer game that apparently was transphobic.
Yeah, I mean, isn't there something to be said here, Scott? Because it kind of undermines, when you start accusing people of those things and they haven't actually done them, it sort of undermines the smear. If there are genuinely transphobic people out there, you should reserve the word for them, shouldn't you? Not just pretend that someone is when they're not.
It dilutes the power of the word, but I'm angry that she hasn't said anything negative about me.
That's what you really want.
I want something. I want to be on the computer game. I want it. What about me? What about my feelings and moods and stuff?
Well, we can just pretend that she spent the last 3 years attacking you.
That would be great.
That's what she does.
That would work. That'd sell me out. I wouldn't have to play here anymore.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it'd be great.
All right, we're going to move on to another question now. This one is from Emma. Where is Emma? Hi there.
Hi. Should drag queens read our children's stories?
And this goes on, doesn't it? Because there's always stories about what they call drag queen story hour. So this is where a drag queen goes into a library or a school, and now a gallery. So this is the Tate Britain. They decided to create this or have a drag queen story event. And then protesters gathered outside. They were very upset about it. Some of those protesters quite unpleasant. Some of them probably have reasonable objections, but there's a lot mixed up in there that don't and are just a bit aggressive and unpleasant. So it created this big storm, effectively. But it was interesting, Francis, because there's a group called Art Not Propaganda who petitioned, and they raised the point with the Tate, saying this is not your role. You're not meant to just be propagandising in this way. And if you do host this event, you're going to get some unpleasant people there as well. And they were sort of saying, why even get involved? They were making a very reasonable point, and it turned out their prediction was right.
Yeah, their prediction was 100% correct. I think this is a problem with a lot of, how could I put this, mainstream art galleries or theatres. A lot of them have become politicised.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, they're always going to put plays on that reflect a particular type of view, or entertainment on that reflects a particular type of view. And even when it doesn't, they somehow shoehorn a particular theory in there. Like, for example, Joan of Arc is now non-binary.
According to the Globe Theatre.
Yes, exactly, which is one of these types of institutions. In fact, a short walk from the...
I just find it very boring. I find it very boring when any sort of artistic or creative body takes on one ideological stance and they end up being... I suppose, preachers rather than artists, and I don't see the point of that.
Yeah, but if you're a parent, you love that drag queen because it takes care of your kid for an hour.
There is that.
And then you can go look at the Turners and sleep through that on your own,
Yeah,
right?
maybe that's what it's about.
But I think that the Tate has lost its way. At least Tate Britain has.
Yes.
And they needed a bit of press, so they brought the act.
That?
Yeah, I mean,
cynical as that.
Look what we're discussing it relentlessly on this network and others. And I mean, look at all the attention that drag queen himself has received.
Yeah.
When I've watched that, I know that person. I've seen the act. She just reads stories. It's nothing more than that.
Well, that's what I've never really understood with drag, because I've been to so many drag shows and I really enjoyed them. Drag is an adult entertainment. That's the appeal of it to me.
Right.
That it's edgy, it's adult.
Not always,
sexual.
though. I mean, you know, there's all sorts of drag. And
But why would you want to sanitise the art form?
I don't think this
way?
character is sanitized, actually. But I know what you mean. I know that these people were concerned that their children are being sexualized, but they hadn't seen the act. They hadn't seen the story read. They were protesting against something they weren't familiar with, actually.
But the act itself has promoted this ideological worldview, right? And so that's and I think the books that are being chosen are more like kind of indoctrination rather than stories. That's
Indoctrination?
Well, sure, yeah. How would you feel if they were reading excerpts of the Bible?
You know, they do that to children all the time,
Right.
in this
and we
country.
complain about it. We say we shouldn't have faith schools.
I would like kids to just read. Wouldn't that be great?
Wouldn't that be good?
Yeah.
I'll just read this statement. We got this statement from Art Not Propaganda, who have raised the objection, and they said, one Google search would have shown them that this is politically inflammatory terrain, that people have been protesting these events for some time, and that the event was unlikely to serve their inclusive aims. Women pointed out to Tate that they find drag offensive, and that a man in sequins performing as a sexy fake lady isn't suitable for kids. Many others pointed out that this particular drag queen promotes gender ideology to kids online and in his self-published books, and breaks Tate's own safeguarding policy by swearing and posting sexual content. So there's all these other issues that are coming up here. But I think what's interesting is that if you are genuinely interested in safeguarding, which is something that the Tate said that they were, creating an event that is bound to have some pretty unpleasant protesters turn up, you know? That doesn't create a safe environment for kids, does it? It's almost like you don't really care about the kids. You care about causing a stir, which is in line with what you were saying about getting publicity.
Yeah, I think so. But I also think it may be more innocent than that. Maybe they just want to include families in a family event and try to get more people in to see art. Maybe it was just that. Maybe they thought people wouldn't protest. I mean, people say they're going to protest events all the time. I've heard many people say they're going to protest your shows.
I know.
And
I wish they would.
I know. And then look, everyone shows they coddle you in the studio, but
people just are nice.
Yeah, where's the batons? Where's the lit torches?
I think that's what I would like. Anyway, moving on to a question from John. And where is John?
Hi, Andrew. Is McDonald's being tasteless or clever?
Well, I think McDonald's has always been relatively tasteless, but in this case, they've taken it to a new level. So this is their advert, their McCrispy advertising billboard, which was put up next to a local crematorium. Now, I don't think they thought this through. Some people have said that this was meant to be some sort of sick joke. You know, you've got one sign which says crematorium this way and a big sign saying McCrispy next to it. But I honestly don't think they even made the connection in their head. I honestly don't.
No.
And if they did, it's funny.
Yeah, look, number one, no advert has ever been that funny.
Right.
And number two, what is created at that crematorium tastes a hell of a lot better than the McCrispy.
There we go. I mean, do you think, Scott...
2 claps, that's what I live for. This is why I did this cash-neutral gig.
I do think, if they did do it deliberately, I do think that's kind of funny. And I think that the idea that people at a funeral don't have a sense of humour isn't my experience of funerals at all.
Yeah, I think, especially when you're talking to a jar. My stepmother was Scottish, so we had her cremated and put her jar in a bar stool. And
very nice.
We, you know, I mean, everything that was said about her on stage was funny,
right?
Because that's how you want to remember people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's weird that people have been upset about this, but also...
You know, I'm upset about when they show this footage. I just saw it from the earthquake in Turkey. They keep saying the window is closing on finding people. I'm like, I think the window closed 5 days ago. Suddenly, and that's the problem. I think people forget, like, that irony is a sense... People really appreciate in this country.
They do, but I suppose they're particularly sensitive when it comes to death in particular. I've had that a lot. People who complain about jokes, when you're talking about something like that, they feel like it's sort of, you can't joke about it. It's not possible to. But people have always done so.
I mean, at every funeral I went to in the 80s for all my friends that died of AIDS, you know, jokes were thrown across the open casket.
Similarly, Irish wakes.
Yeah.
You always, like, people get drunk and they make jokes, and often at the expense of the person who died. If you saw the footage of Graham Chapman's funeral. John Cleese does an incredible eulogy where he says he's glad he's burning in hell. And it's really funny.
Yeah.
It's really funny, you know.
Of course, because that's how we cope. I think that's the thing that people forget, is that a lot of humour is there as a safety valve.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, if we didn't have humour, we would literally go insane because of what we're faced with in our own mortality. So to be able to laugh at something like this is a way for us to be able to deal with it.
Absolutely, but I do come back to the point that I don't think McDonald's are that clever. I think they just...
And the secret sauce is quite nice, actually.
Is it?
It is. It's very good. Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
It tastes better than a finger.
There we are. So, final question now from Ryan. We've got a question from Ryan. Where's Ryan? Hello, Ryan. How are you?
Good evening. Is it discriminatory to audition only male actors for male roles?
Right, so this is really interesting because in the Netherlands there was a production of Waiting for Godot, the Beckett play, but the venue has cancelled the performances because the director, who's an Irish guy, decided to audition only men. Now, if you know the play Waiting for Godot, there are only men in the play. So that might be why he said male actors only. Is that an inclusivity issue?
I think it is, because you're assuming their gender.
Ah, I see. But then Beckett himself, I think Beckett sued a theatre company during his lifetime who tried to do an all-female
because
version.
he's transphobic.
Oh, yeah. Is everything going to be going through that lens now? Isn't this, Scott, it's a bit like when they say, you know, we want gay actors to play gay roles, etc., etc.
Right.
Isn't it possible that actors aren't being themselves when they perform?
Yeah, they forget that the paycheck is because they can act. It's weird, though. They forget to ask the audience what they prefer.
Right.
Because they're the ones paying for it.
Yeah.
And there's loads of shows failing on Broadway this year. There's a big article in the Times and the Guardian about it, about how all these inclusive shows, these performances with inclusive, diverse casts, the audience has lost the translation. They're not understanding what they're watching, so they just stop going.
Yeah, but it has really affected the theatre. It is boring now. But it's also this idea of sort of rewriting production in this way. And we've had this debate endlessly about James Bond. Yeah. Should we have a female James Bond? Well, no, because the character's called James. Yeah. So it's that simple.
It's like when you see Anything Goes in the UK, like in London in the West End, and they do a British production of it. It's a musical set on a boat, and there's a lot of dancing.
Yes.
And it just doesn't work.
Why? Because English people can't dance?
They can't dance. That boat's going to sink.
They make an effort with the accents, though.
They do, for effort with the accents, but they need to drop a stone before they start high kicking, right?
Okay.
It's the Titanic. It just became the Titanic, the show I saw. I walked out after the first act.
Some actual gasps in the audience here. This is mild for Scott. Yeah. OK, so after the break, anyway, on Free Speech Nation, we're going to be talking about a ticketing site, Eventbrite, that is obstructing a book launch because it opposes the author's views. And we'll be meeting with the co-editor of the volume of that book launch at the centre of the row in just a few moments. Do join us in a second.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on
Absolutely.
Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. So joining me now is Sarah Phillimore, family barrister who is currently in a legal dispute with Eventbrite, the ticketing site, who removed the listing for her event, her book launch that she had planned. This is for a book which was called Transpositions, Personal Journeys into Gender Criticism. And the website said in an email, they removed this event because it violates its community guidelines and terms of service on, quote, hateful, dangerous or violent content. Sarah Phillimore joins me now. Welcome, Sarah.
Hello.
So, according to Eventbrite, the content of the book that you have co-edited is hateful, dangerous and violent. Is that right?
Indeed, but what their definition of violence and hate includes is disparagement. And
Right.
when my solicitor made a data subject access request on my behalf, it was very interesting. I think I sent some of it to you because they had GB News down as the voice of conservative outrage.
Oh,
there was
interesting.
there was a lot of chatter at the highest level of the company, and they released quite a lot of the emails to me. And it was quite clear they were saying, oh, we can't really get her on hatred or violence, can we? But we can get her on disparagement, so we'll do that.
Disparagement? But that's not a criminal offence, as far as I'm aware.
It's so broad and so wide as to be utterly meaningless.
Yes.
And that's why the action I'm taking against them is not just for unlawful discrimination under the Equality Act, but for breach of contract. Because we're saying this should be dealt with under UK law. This term is so wide, it's void for uncertainty.
So let's just take us back to what happened. So you've co-edited this book, and this is a book about various experiences of gender-critical views, that sort of idea. The launch is arranged, it sells out, largely through Eventbrite, I should imagine. And then they write to you. What did they do? Or did they just take it off the site? What happened?
Well, I launched the event. No one really cared. I'd sold about 10 tickets. Then I did a tweet announcing the speakers, and one of them was Graham Linehan. That prompted a flurry of people tweeting at Eventbrite, do you really want to be involved with this? So without warning, on the 27th of October, they just pulled it. They sent me an email going, you're in violation. Do email us with any queries. I emailed and was ignored. But luckily, it was picked up by The Telegraph, The Mail. I wrote for The Critic and Spike. And one of their legal counsel from California reached out to me and we had a Zoom. So that was very interesting because the reason that this lawyer gave to me for why Eventbrite had pulled it was that they had a duty of care to people attending and there was a real risk that violent men would turn up and hurt us. Now,
so this was for your own good?
If that's a genuine reason, it's really terrifying because it's saying to these violent men, hey, guys, being violent really works. Now, I don't think that was genuine. I think it was just an attempt to make me go away, which obviously didn't work.
Yes, because they oppose what the book explores ideologically, I suppose. I mean, the fact that they respond... I mean, you were saying that it only sold out then after this happened. It drew attention.
I mean, it was great of that. I mean, on an individual level, it was fantastic because the book launch sold out. We pitched up at the Conway Hall. There was no protest, which I found really disappointing, actually. I was ready to film it. So on an individual level, it was fine. But, of course, on a more on a wider level, it's not fine at all, because Eventbrite could be any of the big tech companies.
Yes.
All of them have the same community standards,
yes,
which prohibit violent, dangerous, blah, blah, blah. But again, the data subject access request was so interesting because they were talking about Women's Place UK, because they also went and pulled, I think, 3 events that organisation were involved in. And they said quite amusingly, well, these organisers are a bit more buttoned up than Phillimore, but their events are essentially the same because they operate around denialism and exclusion of trans people. And I think that's such an interesting message for those of us who are gender critical. It doesn't matter what we do, what we say, whether we're affiliated with the left or the right wing, we will be tarred with the same brush as violent extremist bigots.
And there's a broader problem here, isn't there? Is that insofar as what business is it of this company, whether they happen to agree with you or not? Why should that even be relevant?
Well, this is why I'm saying this is such a big thing. It's not just my little book launch, which was great fun, 70 people turned up, we all had a chat and a laugh. It's about our democracy. I don't want to sound hysterical, but the Equality Act was passed by Parliament, so democratic mandate, that's the law of this country. Eventbrite are now saying to me that they're not bound by the laws of the UK at all. Interestingly, they're still going to reply in detail to my solicitor's letter before action, which suggests to me they might not be wholly confident in that position. But if that's right, we all need to know, because these community standards from all the big tech companies, they're all the same. They're going to be imposed on citizens of the United Kingdom in direct contravention to our domestic law. And what are we going to do about this?
We had the same thing, didn't we, when PayPal demonetised it with the Free Speech Union and Toby Young's account, and they got rid of that, and they said that they weren't beholden to the laws of the land because they were based in California, I think.
It's not just a threat to democracy, it's very, very harmful to individuals because these private American companies have effective monopolies. There's no real equivalent to Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn or PayPal. If you find yourself excluded from those services, you suffer real harm.
Yes.
So exclusion should only be for a legitimate reason, and it's not. The reason given was completely discriminatory. The men and women who'd contributed stories to my book, you can buy it from Amazon, bargain, £10. I thought it was an important historical artefact because it was people saying, whoa, this was a bit weird, and this is when I realised things were a bit weird. It's just the stories of ordinary men and women, because what we're living through is unprecedented. We had the satanic panic, but that really only didn't even touch the sides. This is all-encompassing. Every organisation is captured by it.
Yes, and you're dealing with people who are not extremists. You know, you mentioned Graham Linehan, writer of Father Ted, one of the most successful sitcoms ever produced. It's not like you've invited Pol Pot to give a talk or something like that. So this is such an extreme reaction.
I mean, it is terrifying. I'm looking on Twitter on the way in, and someone reminded me again, there was a lobby group who published that fears about right-wing extremism and transphobia, basically accusing women like me of being guilty of genocide.
Yeah.
And this kind of hysteria and insanity is promoted and empowered and amplified. And my perfectly legitimate view that women don't have penises, it now gets me labelled a terrorist.
So can we clarify where the law stands on this for people? Because some people won't know what the Equality Act does and what it protects.
Well, it's interesting because, again, I get lots of people on social media going, gender-critical beliefs are protected. I don't believe so. But my For Starters case was so important back in June 2021 because prior to that, she'd been told a belief that sex was real and immutable made her akin to a Nazi. She was not protected. Her belief did not pass the Granger criteria. So she took that to the Employment Appeal Tribunal and they agreed with her. And they said belief that sex is real and it matters is a protected belief under the Equality Act. So under Section 29, you may not, as a service provider, deny a service to an individual on the basis of that they hold a protected belief.
Well, that's really important. I mean, for one thing, people might balk at this because they might think, well, the belief that there are men and women, that's just a matter of fact, isn't it? But leaving that aside, it is now the case from what you're saying, since the For Starter case, if someone were to fire someone for believing that there are men and women, you are now protected by law.
Yeah, it's frustrating beyond belief that a biological fact now has to be reframed as a philosophical belief, but I'm afraid that's what we're stuck with.
Okay.
But thankfully, the Equality Act does protect that. So, yeah, just as someone can't say, well, you're gay, you're sacked, you're black, you're sacked, they can't say, you think women don't have penises, you're sacked. We are protected.
OK, so that's good to know that that protection is in place.
Yeah.
But then this case will test, I suppose, whether or not this applies to corporations that are based overseas and in terms of the provision of goods and services, I suppose.
And we really need to know, because so much of our lives now depend on these American companies and the services they provide. If they really can operate, making a profit off UK citizens while ignoring UK law, we need to know.
Yes.
Because I think that has profound implications for our democracy.
And if, for instance, Eventbrite would have said, well, we don't want to hold an event by someone who's gay, and we're going to pull it because of that, would that be legal?
Well, according to American law, they may have different protections. The problem is women who believe that sex is real, it matters, don't appear to be protected under American law at all. So that might be slightly different. I'm not an American lawyer, so I don't know. But we go back to the fundamental point. They're operating here, making a profit here. Are they bound by our laws or not?
So if you pursue this case and it turns out that Eventbrite win because they're not bound to the law of this land in terms of their policy, what do we do after that?
Well, we need to start talking. Our politicians need to wake up. There needs to be serious discussion at the highest level. What is this saying about the laws our Parliament have passed? Are they going to govern UK citizens or not? I think it's a massive question.
And finally, Sarah, people watching at home, is there any way that they can support you at all in this?
Yeah, I've written a piece for Substack, which I'm going to publish on the way home. So if anyone has heard what I've got to say and wants to know more, I'm going to publish lots of links, including, obviously, the link to my crowdfunder, because I can't do this without people's help. So if anyone feels moved to donate £5 or £10, that would be wonderful.
And they can find you on Twitter. What's your Twitter handle then?
At SV Phillimore.
Fantastic. Sarah, thanks very much for joining me.
Thank you.
And after the break on Free Speech Nation, as God goes gender neutral, should we start praying to them rather than him? See you in 3 minutes.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
As a guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Now then, God could be referred to in non-gendered terms during Church of England services for the first time. Breaking with centuries of tradition, bishops have announced they are launching a major project on gendered language this spring. It may suggest that priests can stop using the male pronouns he and him when referring to God in some prayers, or even that they can drop the famous phrase, Our Father, from the start of the Lord's Prayer. However, such a radical rewriting would have had to be agreed by by the Church's governing body, the General Synod, and would be fiercely resisted, of course, by traditionalists for breaking away from the words of the Bible. So joining me now to discuss this, I have Martine Oborne, Chair of Women and the Church, and Gavin Ashenden, former chaplain to Queen Elizabeth II. Thanks for joining me. Gavin Ashenden, I'm going to come to you first. So what's so wrong with the idea of perceiving or conceiving of God as gender neutral?
I think part of the problem is that every time we change our language, we change the philosophy or the ideas. Language and ideas are bound very closely together. I mean, for example, you said, what about calling God them? So that takes us into polytheism. If you think there's more than one God, you have to use they. The idea of using he, or God's favourite chosen personal pronoun, it suggests that it's different from either the worship of goddesses or many gods, and so it fulfills a particular descriptive function.
Martine Oborne, can I ask you about this? Is it not the case that this feels very much like the Church of England is sort of bringing in these very voguish concerns, these ideological concerns that really are very ephemeral and probably we won't even be talking about in 30, 40 years' time? Why are we doing this?
Well, I don't think it's about the Church of England trying to be very woke or anything like that. I think it's important for two. Well, first of all, it's very biblical to think of God as a mother as well as a father. And God is not a man. And getting over this idea that God is a rather clumsy and lazy idea, that we believe somehow in God being a little old man sitting on a cloud up in the sky. I think anything that helps us see that God is beyond gender, I think, is very important. And in the Bible, we're told that God creates humankind in his image, male and female. He creates them. The metaphor of father is very important, and no one is talking about getting rid of the metaphor of father in reference to God. And no one's actually talking about changing the words of the Lord's Prayer. But as I understand it, the project is about looking at maybe some additional ways and when we might refer to as God as mother. There are lots in scripture, it talks about God giving birth to his people, talks about God comforting his people like a mother. It's not a woke thing. It's about giving a better reflection of who God is. And also there is something about how women and girls do struggle with an image of God being presented to them that seems male, male, male. And so having a truer and more inclusive representation of God in our liturgy, I think, could be very helpful.
Well, it's interesting. Can I come to you, Gavin Ashenden, about that? Because the reporting on this in the press has very much been making the case that the name Our Father would change, that God would be referred to not with he or him pronouns. So is Martine Oborne right that, in fact, that's not the case here?
No, I don't think she is, I'm afraid, because the American Anglicans have been up doing this for about 25 years. So we know what the trajectory looks like. It's, as you say, it's a trajectory that accommodates itself to the culture. And unfortunately, particularly nowadays, actually toxic masculinity has been imposed upon Christianity as well. And so the notion of fatherhood has become quite repellent to some people. And the prayer's already been changed colloquially. People talk about creator, sustainer in spirit to avoid the masculinity of the Trinity. So that's already happening. And I think the difference is that traditionalists want to use religion in a way that works best. I mean, looking back over 2,000 years, what's been good, what's been bad? Let's avoid the bad and use the best. The problem with this particular movement is, as you say, it's trendy, woke, accommodating itself to a culture that's in real trouble in terms of the way it understands sex and identity and mental stability. So there's a very good reason for sticking with what works rather than adopting the anarchy of our present circumstances.
Reverend Oborn, can I put that to you in terms of this idea of our Father as a metaphor? That was a word that you used. You acknowledge that this is a metaphor. The people who are praying to God as our Father understand that they are not literally saying that he's a father in that sense, and that God is more than that. So really, what's the harm?
No harm at all. And there's absolutely no suggestion that the Lord's Prayer is going to be changed. The only thing that's been announced is that there's a project to look at gendered language in relation to God, which might lead to some additional prayers being authorised alongside existing prayers. And there's absolutely no suggestion that anyone's going to start rewriting the Lord's Prayer, which would be inappropriate because actually it's the words, as best we know, that Jesus gave to his disciples for that particular prayer.
So, Gavin Ashenden, if it is the case that the Church is simply implementing new prayers to go alongside the traditional prayers, why would that be a problem?
Oh, well, I was an Anglican for 40 years and sat on the General Synod for 20. Every one of these changes begins with the promise. We're just going to do a little bit of tinkering, and we promise you, A, nothing much will change, and B, if you don't like it, you can stay. And every single time the promise has been broken, there have been serious changes, and then people who didn't like it were driven out. So I mean, there's no reason for thinking that's not going to happen again.
I mean, it's certainly the case, isn't it, that the Church of England is currently perceived, irrespective of what has been said tonight, it is very much perceived as being on the woke side, and it's perceived as doing a lot of kind of gesture politics in that direction. Is it not the case, Martin Oborn, that the Church should really be staying out of these kind of cultural disputes?
I mean, let me just say that we already have a Eucharistic prayer, Prayer G, authorized, which refers to God gathering his people like a mother. And also, not just references to God as mother in the Bible, but theologians over the whole history of Christian tradition have referred to as God as mother. I mean, medieval theologians like Julian of Norwich in the 14th century said God is our mother as truly as he is our father. It's not wokeism. It's doing two important things. One, helping us to get away from a very unhelpful idea that Christians believe that God's a man sitting on a cloud. And two, very helpful to have language that is less excluding for women and girls who, when they come to faith, are being presented with a God who is male, male, male. And
so can I just ask, is it your contention then that if the woke movement did not exist, I mean, we're not having these discussions, the Church would be implementing these new policies anyway?
Yeah, well, I mean, it goes back right to the Bible, this understanding of God as mother, as well as God as father. As I say, the Bible talks about God giving birth to his people. It talks about him having a womb in some parts. So, the language is there. I admit that, there are far more references to father and God as a father. Although having said that, in Genesis, at one point, God refers to himself as we. He talks about having created humanity in our image. There's that as well. But I mean,
can I come to you, Gavin Ashenden, about that? Are you persuaded, off the back of what Martin Oborn has said, that actually this is entirely divorced from the notion of wokeism, and that we would be having these conversations anyway as a matter of course?
Well, it isn't. I mean, Martin's quite right in saying that the issues of gender philosophically are really quite complex. And she's given some examples of where, of course, there's femininity and masculinity. Of course there is. But the way the Church of England intends to do it is essentially driven by politics. If it was driven by theology and by practice and by the Church's experience, it would be far more nuanced. And it was the kind of thing we could have a conversation about properly. But this is a political movement. It's intended to drive out masculinity, give a preference to femininity. I don't think a little old lady on a cloud is any better than a little old man on a cloud. One of the things we have to do is be a bit more sophisticated about the way we use gender. And we should keep it out of a political struggle, and especially out of the woke wars.
And why is it that you think, Gavin Ashenden, that the Church of England seems to be susceptible to the woke movement? You would have thought that a traditionalist body, such as the Church of England, would be the one place where these things wouldn't infect.
Well, I became a Catholic partly in response to the way in which the Church of England was becoming incoherent in what it believed. And one of the things Catholics have found is that the Latin Mass is becoming one of the most popular ways of approaching God and saying our prayers. And I think what we're finding is that the sort of the slippery surface of our current culture is alarming for a lot of people. And what they want is handholds that work. And so that's one of the reasons. But the Church of England is essentially a liberal and experimental body, and that can be a very good thing in certain circumstances, but just at the moment it's actually a bad thing and it won't serve them very well.
OK, final word to you, Martin Oborn, if you would.
Well, I'm old enough to remember when people started calling female policemen police officers, and we started to use that language, and or we started to say chair rather than chairman. And at the time, quite a lot of people were like, oh, it doesn't really matter. Women understand that it includes them. Language does matter, and it can be very excluding. I'm glad that we don't expect women to all think of themselves as policemen. We've changed language in this way. It's a more accurate reflection of God to show that God is beyond gender, that he's not an old man on the sky, neither is he an old woman sitting up in the sky. And if we can get away from that language, I think that's helpful. And if we can be more missional and inclusive in our language, I think that's all for the good.
Well, thank you both ever so much for offering your perspectives. Thank you very much. And after the break on Free Speech Nation, I'm going to be speaking to Baroness Claire Fox on the controversial Public Order Bill. See you in a few minutes.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. So the government's controversial public order bill has faced a setback in the House of Lords as amendments to give police more powers to stop protest were defeated. Ministers wanted to give the police the power to stop and search without suspicion near to a protest. They also wanted to shut down demonstrations before they become disruptive in a bid to stop tactics such as slow marching and blocking roads. Critics, however, called the plan to shut down protests before they escalate an attack on the right to protest, and on Tuesday night, peers in the House of Lords rejected it by 254 votes to 240. Joining me now to discuss this further is Director of the Academy of Ideas, Baroness Claire Fox. Thanks for joining me tonight. Could you begin by telling us what is so wrong with this bill?
Well, there's an awful lot wrong with it because although it's been motivated by the infuriating way that Just Stop Oil and various Extinction Rebellion type protests have, disrupted the lives of ordinary people, when you actually look at what the bill says, it won't be aimed at them. It'll be aimed at anyone ever who wants to protest. And there's a lot of very draconian aspects of it. I'm afraid the Lords didn't stop it. It just simply amended it to get rid of the worst aspects of some of the clauses that were in the bill, and that's gone back to the House of Commons, and they'll decide whether they accept what the Lords suggested or not. But, you've just had a very interesting conversation, and at the end there, it was all about language matters, and language does matter. And here we had a bill in which the whole premise is that the state and the police could use the phrase serious disruption to really take away every civil liberty of anyone, whether they were protesting against, I don't know, drag queen story hour, or whether it was against, low traffic neighborhoods or Just Stop Oil. And they didn't define what serious disruption was. They just refused to define it. And they were sort of said, well, you know what we mean. So it would be left up to the police to say what they thought serious disruption was. And they refused to pin it down. So that was very dangerous.
Well, that's a real problem, isn't it? And we've seen this before with the police crime and sentencing bill, where we had the government were effectively saying if a protest was too noisy, the police could arbitrarily decide that they would shut it down. Because that didn't get through, so now there are these amendments to this bill presently. So why can't the government see the importance of really saying what they mean here?
Well, one of the difficulties is that I think this is more a reflection of a policing crisis, because actually, if you look at the public order legislation that we already have on the statute books, it is more than draconian, I might say, but certainly more than serious enough for the police to be able to actually arrest and stop the demonstrations that we have. And I mean, after all, Just Stop Oil have just stopped protesting because they said they kept getting arrested. So they obviously do have the law at the moment that they could use. But there was something wrong with the fact that the police seem to be rather reticent and hesitant to intervening. And so what the problem we've got with the political establishment at the moment is when they don't know what to do, instead of actually going out and either enforcing laws that we already have and then convincing institutions they've got to do their job, they bring in more laws. I mean, it seems ludicrous to me. But think of the consequence of this. You talked about one of the amendments that passed, which was suspicion-less stop and search. And I used the example in the speech that I gave of what it felt like during lockdown when ordinary law-abiding citizens were stopped by the police if they sat down and had a coffee on a bench. I was using the example of care workers who'd done just that. And when they kind of said, oh, don't, I'm not doing anything wrong, what's wrong with you? Then they were being threatened with arrest. And I was making the point that if you're stopped and searched when you're just literally walking in the vicinity of where a demonstration might be about to be held, and when we actually asked the minister, well, why is it suspicion-less stop and search where there's no suspicion? He said, well, sometimes the police don't have any suspicions and therefore they should stop and search. I mean, this is arbitrary power of the sort that you would not expect to see in a modern democracy. So although I'm, on the one hand, very hesitant of using the Lords to block the government, because after all, we're not elected and the House of Commons is the elected house. And secondly, I do know that there are times when people get frustrated at the inability of the police to deal with things. I do want people to look carefully at what the government have been trying to effect in this way. And I think that's one of the things that we kicked out, just one thing was funny, was they were trying to bring in these serious disruption prevention orders, and actually that's gone ahead. But one amendment that did pass was to raise the trigger, because the way it was was that you could literally have dropped your kids off at a demonstration that then got violent later, and you, as the driver, the parent, could be smacked with a serious disruption prevention order, which could basically mean that you're criminalised for a year.
And as you've made clear, the laws are already in place to stop vandalism, for instance, the kind of thing that Just Stop Oil and Insulate Britain were up to. So the laws are there already. What does it say, though, about this government? Because this government seems to be very down on the idea of the right to protest. At the same time, they have their online safety bill, and even that phrase safety is suggestive of a belief that words can be the same thing as violence. Is it just the case that the government are not very good when it comes to free expression?
Well, I mean, I absolutely agree with you on that. And I think that one of the ways that they get away with it is that we've seen a struggle. I mean, you've written about it in books that you've written on free speech, where you're given this choice between, do you want to be safe or do you want to be free? And the difficulty is that they deploy this, we will protect you against all potential horrible actions or incidents. And that's maybe in terms of protest, you know, they might disrupt you. And so on and so forth. And by the way, if they're sitting on the M25, I say the police should drag them off and take them away, right? So we're not talking about me just like turning a blind eye to anything. I'm saying that it's very dangerous when the government's immediate response is to call safety as opposed to freedom. And we see in the online safety bill that they are absolutely getting carried away with themselves. A bill which should have been very discreetly only targeted at protecting children. And that's what most people are interested in. How can we protect children? Because it is true that children are a category of people that we make exceptions in terms of liberty for. We don't give them freedom to roam around. We look after them and we have safeguarding measures. But the problem is they've let this spill into adult society. And the online safety bill, which they say they've got rid of lawful but harmful clauses, so it's not as threat to safe free speech at all. Actually reading it, it's frightening what we would be able to say online.
Claire, I'm afraid we're going to have to go. We have run out of time, but I really appreciate you joining me. OK, we're going to see you in a few minutes. We've got to take a break. See you in a bit.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel. Foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
There's plenty more still to come on Free Speech Nation this week. We'll cover last night's Brit Awards and a UFO shot down in the US. And joining me in the studio is another cancelled comedian and free speech activist, Toby Young. But let's get a news update first from Bethany Elsey.
Good evening. Here's your top stories from the GB newsroom. The number of people who've been killed in the earthquakes that hit Turkey and Syria on Monday has risen to 33,000. Officials say the window for finding survivors is closing, but some were pulled from the rubble alive today, including a 9-year-old boy who spent almost a week under a collapsed building. An appeal by the UK's Disasters Emergency Committee has raised more than £60 million in just 3 days. The Labour Party is urging the BBC chair to reconsider his position after MPs found he breached standards when applying for the role. A cross-party committee says Richard Sharp made significant errors of judgment when he failed to declare that he'd helped Boris Johnson to secure a loan when he was Prime Minister. Shadow Culture Secretary Lucy Powell is questioning whether he's still able to uphold trust and independence in the broadcaster.
His damning report, it really is an unprecedented report, means that Mr Sharp's position is increasingly untenable, and he really should now reflect on whether he's able to carry out that very important role as the BBC chair to uphold public trust and independence of the BBC.
Warrington police have launched a murder investigation after a 16-year-old girl was found stabbed to death in Cheshire yesterday. Brianna Gay was found by members of the public with multiple stab wounds near Linear Park. Emergency services arrived, but she was pronounced dead at the scene. The force is looking to speak with 2 people described as a white man and woman. The chair of the Commons Defence Select Committee is urging Rishi Sunak to boost defence spending due to threats of a new Cold War. Tory MP Tobias Ellwood told GB News we need more money to replace military equipment and deal with aggression from Russia and China. It comes after reports that some NATO allies are concerned about the UK's military readiness. And a high-altitude object tracked over northern Canada that officials say posed a threat to civilian aircraft has been shot down over the Yukon. It's the 3rd object to have been shot down over North America in the past week, which at least one top US lawmaker says is another suspected Chinese spy balloon. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says his forces will now recover and analyse the wreckage. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now, though, it's back to Free Speech Nation.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Another week, another fellow comic is cancelled, and this time it is Samantha Presti, who was to perform her Clown, Pray, Love show on Friday at the Leicester Comedy Festival. She wrote a column for the comedy industry website Chortle in which she took aim at the cowardice of contemporary comics and an ideology that aims to curtail freedom of expression and women's sex-based rights. And the article sparked uproar among activists and comedians. They told the venue that she was due to play at that they were going to snub the location as they had apparently given a platform to a bigot. As a result, she had had her show cancelled. Well, Samantha the Bigot joins me now. Welcome to the show. So, I mean, they really went for you on this one, didn't they, Samantha? You wrote this article. Do you want to just tell us what you were saying, basically, in the article?
I was basically saying, bye-bye, comedy world. This is boring. I'm out. You're all a bunch of snobs. Steve Bennett put a tweet out saying that Samantha Presti is leaving the comedy industry because comedians are not saying what she wants to say on trans issues, which is not what I said.
So we should clarify, Steve Bennett is the editor of this website.
Yeah,
Chortle.
he's the comedy critic that gave Dave Chappelle's Grammy-winning show 2 stars.
So now you're saying you were misrepresented in terms of what you had to say?
Yeah, I feel like he twisted my words, and I did write to him and say, hey, can you put my original headline in, which was, I'm leaving comedy to find a husband with balls.
So what is it about the comedy industry? I mean, that, you know, you've been performing stand-up for a long time, and you say in the article that comedians aren't really taking risks anymore, I suppose, or they're being wimps, is I think the word you described.
They're wimps. They're so boring. I feel like anybody that's interesting or has a voice immediately gets labelled as racist, transphobic, or a Nazi, and they're pushed out. So this last Edinburgh Fringe, which was the first Fringe post-pandemic proper, Jerry Sadowitz got cancelled, and he's well respected. You know, he does this kind of subversive, quite hard-hitting material, but it's art, you know, it's art. We're grown-ups, we know that it's art. We know that that is not a literal Nazi on the stage, it's art. But he got cancelled, and pretty much no one, probably you guys did, but pretty much no one at the Edinburgh Fringe took a stand. I did, but I'm just a little comic. I've never aimed for popularity or TV. I'm just like, right, I want to make shows. I just need a little audience. I want to build a little fan base, and then I can do what I like to do. But they all want that. They all want to be on live at the Apollo, and they will zip their mouths to not get any adverse attention, which is exactly what a comedian is supposed to do. Dave Chappelle said that it's a comedian's duty to speak recklessly. And if we can't speak recklessly, who can? So it's not just a freedom of expression in the arts, it's a democracy thing. If I can't have an opinion that women should be able to have same-sex spaces without them being labelled a TERF, it's not just that art is being censored, it's that democracy is at risk. It's dangerous.
I mean, I wonder what annoyed them more about your article. Was it the fact that you were saying, well, they should have stood up for Jerry Sadowitz, which, of course, they should, and they failed to do so out of cowardice, probably cowardice, or is it that you made the point that women ought to have their own spaces away from men and that this has been interpreted as transphobia?
I don't know. It could have just also been that I said that they weren't very sexy.
That might be more likely, actually. Yeah.
I've been doing comedy 9 years, and I've only ever slept with one comedian, just one comedian. And he now wears a dress, which is a massive turn-off.
And that's the point that you made in the article. So there's all sorts of ways in which you've annoyed people. But actually, so what if you wrote an article annoying people? Isn't annoying people part of our job sometimes?
Yeah, that's why I got into comedy. I saw people like Bill Hicks and George Carlin, and I'm like, wow, they're telling the truth. Comedy it's a platform for the truth, and I have truth tattooed on my wrist. It's one of my highest values, along with freedom, which I guess goes hand in hand. But we don't seem to have comedians like, you know, you got Dave Chappelle, but he's being gaslit by the media. His show is not transphobic, the show that he did. did. It's a beautiful show about his trans woman friend, and he was actually helping her with her comedy career. And he says you can make fun of anyone if you see them as an equal. It's not about punching up or down, you're punching straight. And I agree with that, but it seems nobody else does.
It's interesting. So you had a show, you were saying in this article, you were saying goodbye to comedy. You had this final show you were going to do at the Leicester Comedy Festival. Then some other comedians contacted the venue and said, well, we're booked at the same venue, we can't have that.
On a different night.
On a different night, because they felt unsafe.
They were
unsafe.
unsafe.
Your very presence tainted the venue or something.
Yeah.
But what's worse about, I mean, the complaint is just quite funny in of itself, but then they capitulated. The venue said, OK, we're cancelling your show. Your show got cancelled.
Yeah, I was on a week after them, but apparently my views, my opinions, my personal opinions was so scary that they couldn't even be in the same venue if I'm going to arrive a whole week later.
So this is absolutely
it's just
fascinating.
Bonkers.
OK, well,
bonkers.
I want to bring in my other panellists here because I've got two comedians here, very experienced. Now, Scott Kapura, can I come to you first? What do you make of Samantha's case here? What do you make of a venue that pulls an event because of a couple of complaints in this way?
Yeah, no, it's not great. Well, when I played the Melbourne Comedy Festival in 2001 or 2 or something, I can't remember, I was high, but when I did it, I had a TV appearance where I did my act as I'd been hired, and it was so offensive that my show was pulled off the board, that the woman, Susan Proven, who managed the festival, told me in a radio appearance that I should just leave the country.
Wow.
The Catholic Church got on my show, and it was fantastic, and said, and actually I was right on before Jerry Sadowitz in the same venue, which I considered an honor. I'd look backstage and I'd see him sitting on his props about ready to go on because he does magic. He's fantastic. And he got some protests there too. And in those days, it was seen as negative, but of course now protest sells you out.
Are you surprised though that Jerry Sadowitz, I mean, as Samantha says, people didn't stick up for Jerry Sadowitz when his show got pulled?
Well, you know, I think comedians, especially in the Edinburgh Fringe, they're so wrapped up in their own world. Maybe he's only there for 2 nights. Maybe some comedians didn't even know it was happening.
Oh,
maybe,
it was everywhere.
Well,
Everybody knew. We were all talking about. We were all whispering about it, just making sure that nobody could hear us.
Of course,
and for us too.
And I wasn't there, but I wrote stuff on Facebook and supported Jerry. I think he's a genius. But you know, there's so much money at stake there. That's part of the problem at Edinburgh. You said it yourself earlier.
Yeah.
It costs 10 grand before you even get there.
Yeah.
And I think these people are thinking, I can't blow that money. I'm here. It's a trade fair now. It's no longer an arts festival. Let's be honest. Your perception of what the Edinburgh Festival is probably different from other people's. They're there to move forward. They're there to be TV presenters. They're not really interested in the comedy circuit at all, really. It's just a step on a ladder to something else.
But isn't that kind of sad, Samantha, the idea that people are in it just for the money and not for the vocation of comedy?
For the popularity, yeah. At an arts festival, the biggest arts festival in the world, people are compromising their integrity for popularity and money.
They want to be liked, which is a different... I agree with you. Comedians, when I started in the 1890s, they didn't care about being liked. They just wanted to do their shtick. But now it feels as though some of the younger people, they want... Yeah.
Can I bring in Francis Foster at this point? Francis, do you have any thoughts about Samantha's case in particular?
Well, I think this is what happens, Samantha, when you are actually honest about what you think in the comedy industry. The comedy industry has these orthodox views. And if you stray to the left or to the right on these orthodox views, you are going to see yourself in real problems. And what you did, and what I couldn't believe you did, is you walked up to the third rail, which is a trans debate, and literally went,
Yeah.
And then what happened is the inevitable explosion because nobody can admit anymore that willies and vaginas exist.
But isn't that interesting that you chose to publish this article in Chortle, but that is going into the lion's den because the comedy industry is very has its orthodoxies now, and they're very much perpetuated by that website in particular. And so by publishing it there, you knew surely that the backlash would be intense.
I did expect a backlash, and I was fine with that, you know, when they were all calling me transphobic and you know, just really nasty. A lot of comedians that have never actually come to my shows were telling me you're not funny. That's fine. I can handle that. That's fair game, because I called them all self-censoring wimps. Fair, right?
So they get
But to cancel my show...
Yeah, that's the
I've
difference.
invested thousands. I've been to clown school in the pandemic. It cost me probably over 10 grand, and my show is about going to theatre school as a working-class girl from the fourth most deprived town in England, finally getting my dream to go to theatre school, Gaulier I went to, That's what my show is about. And then finally getting my dream, and then they're like, oh, you can't sit with us. Like, oh.
So this is the difference, isn't it? I mean, what you're saying, Scott, about what people perceive the Edinburgh Fringe to be about and about how it's there as a trade fair, and I think you're right about that. I think that is what it is at the moment. But to intervene and to actually damage someone else's career because you don't like their opinion, that is surely beyond the pale.
It's only a matter of time, really. It'll happen to other people, not just you, sadly. And I also think that the comedy industry should be a bit more careful. They're trying to promote what they say is diversity. They're trying to promote, especially female comedians on stage. And then here they are, some of these people in Leicester, telling you can't go on stage. It's contradictory, isn't it? And actually, it's not just the industry. It is the audience sometimes, too. They get a bit anxious when you bring stuff up around the trans issue, so that means I do 20 more minutes on it. And, and I've had clubs say, are you going to, here in this town, are you going to close with that bit tomorrow night, doing a 3-night run? I'm like, oh, yeah, and then I do 5 more minutes on the subject because it makes the club anxious too. But that's because I've been dropped on my head and I hate authority figures.
Yes, you do like the audience to be anxious.
Oh, well, Scott. I want them to get their money's worth. If they're not nervous by the end of the show, then what's the point of any of this? It's not a seminar. I don't care what they think. There's a buffer. We'll never be friends. I want them to enjoy themselves.
What do you think about this, Samantha? Can you do it? Do you have any recourse at this point to get your show back on, or is that it? Is that decision been made? Can you challenge it in any way?
Well, Leicester Comedy Festival haven't actually made public comment. It's my promoter that's pulled me furthest from the sea, funded by the Arts Council. So they've pulled me. Leicester haven't said anything. I mean, if it was me running a venue in Leicester, I'd be like, come and perform at my venue. But at this late stage, with 5 days to go, I don't think there'll be any spaces for me to perform in other venues.
But it's fascinating, isn't it, that a venue can't just say, well, look, this performer has a certain opinion. The audience get to decide. If you're offended, then don't buy a ticket,
And my show isn't even about that, and they know that, and they said that in the email that they sent to me. They're like, look, we know that your show is not about the things that you were writing about in the article, but still, we don't want to be associated with you, like it's catching or something.
Well, the staff might not feel safe.
Well, there's that, isn't there?
They have to worry about this.
Francis, what do you think of that? Like this idea of safety within comedy, does it really have a place?
No, it has no place.
No.
But you see, this is the problem with comedy at the moment, is that because the industry is collapsing in on itself, because the money's no longer there, because the opportunities are no longer there, there are people fighting it out for fewer and fewer opportunities. And as a result of that, the industry has become more cutthroat. So people will do whatever it takes in order to get to that next level.
Well, that's what Scott was saying about the money, you know, and the need to please.
No, but it's even worse, because before, the comedy industry had money in it. You could actually ascend, get on TV and build a career for yourself. Even now, when you go on TV, there is no career to be had because nobody watches TV anymore, because it's been hollowed out from the inside by this diversity agenda. And this is the thing that nobody talks about with diversity. People talk about diversity. What the comedy industry wants and what they desire is for people of all genders, ages and races to be represented as long as they have the same opinion. Yeah. And it's actually homophobic and it's racist.
But that was interesting, Samantha, that this website felt the need to put an addendum onto your article to say, to distance itself from you, to say, well, we're only publishing it for freedom of speech, we don't agree with her. What a weird thing to have to do.
Yeah, and I said in the opinion piece that I wrote that these evangelists of identity politics, they don't actually stand for the marginalised groups that they purport to defend. And an Asian comedian reached out to me yesterday privately. A lot of people have reached out privately because they will go after people's livelihoods.
They will.
And said that the same guy that's cancelled you tried to cancel me. He called me a racist. I'm Asian.
Well, that's incoherent, obviously.
Yeah.
But were you surprised, Francis, at the fact that Chortle put an addendum to the article? I've never seen them do that, by the way.
No, they've never done that.
Never before.
No, it doesn't surprise me because it's another way for him to virtue signal and for him to make himself look good and also not ostracise his fellow peers. Because the thing that nobody talks about in this is that the reason everyone's so quiet is they know that the moment they stray from the line, they're done and they're finished.
But this is the point, is when you have sort of comedy critics and people within the industry saying, actually, we're going to make a statement to distance ourselves from this view, it does narrow the way in which the views that will be acceptable.
It's a big responsibility being the diverse comic on the bill. I know how that feels. And for years, there were no openly gay comics on the circuit. So I'd be the one that, you know, was the reason the show was tricky or offbeat. I was the offbeat guy. And they'd close with me in case I tanked, in case I did terribly, so that, you know, people at least got a decent show. That happens when they send me in the Middle East all the time. They do that. They close with me because they're afraid of what's going to happen. The thing is, it's homophobic, like you said, racist to think I'm diverse. I'm a white middle-class guy from the suburbs. And in fact, my act sounds very similar to the other 3 white middle-class guys that have been on before me.
But class doesn't count, Scott.
That's the thing.
It's about identity
It's ridiculous,
politics.
but identity is not determined, diversity is not determined by skin color or gender. You're right. It's homophobic and racist, and it's really tricky for a club to assume an audience feels the same.
So what's the future for the industry? I mean, if you're saying, Samantha, that you're not going to continue because of the narrowness of what is permitted in terms of opinion in particular, what's going to happen now? Is it going to keep going down this road, or are comedians going to start being a little bit braver about what they say and think?
I feel if you want to be truly free as a comic, you've just got to build your own audience and your own platforms and come on GB News.
Well, on that fantastic note, we'll end it there. Thank you, Samantha Presti. And next up on Free Speech Nation, we're going to get some more wonderful questions from our beautiful audience here. Back in 3 minutes.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not
believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Let's get some more questions from our beautiful studio audience. Our first question is from John. Where's John?
Hello, good
Hiya.
evening.
Hi, is Elon Musk the right man for the job?
We've been discussing this for a while now, whether Elon Musk is right to have taken over Twitter. He has been preoccupied with worries about how many people are seeing his tweets at the moment. This was an interesting twist in the tale. So last week, he's the Twitter CEO. Obviously, he took his Twitter account private for a day to test whether that might boost the size of his audience. And the move came after several prominent right-wing accounts that Musk interacts with complained about recent changes to Twitter that have reduced their reach. Is it just the case that maybe people aren't as interested in his tweets anymore? What's going on here?
Yeah, I think that might be a thing. I mean, there are things that Elon does that I agree with, but can we just all admit, Elon, mate, you're not that funny. You're not.
He's quite funny sometimes.
Come on, let that sink in, walking in with the sink. Come on, mate. It's not 1987. Get off.
I admit that wasn't the best of his jokes.
No.
But nevertheless, it's interesting that the fact that he took over Twitter, though, I think is generally a good thing.
Yes,
because I
agree.
think Twitter was absolutely tanking and it needed to be re-energised in one way or another. And also, so many accounts have been banned for no reason at all, mostly feminists, I have to say. And they're mostly back now because he does have a commitment to freedom of speech, which I think is great.
Yeah. Look, so I've been what we noticed at Trigonometry and with my own personal account is that we saw zero growth. They had shadow banned us. The moment Elon came in, the growth has been six times what it was before. So for us, it was a lot better.
That's a good point. I mean, Twitter was, in fact, shadow banning. We now have proof of that. They're effectively saying, this group of sort of 20-somethings in Silicon Valley, if they don't like your opinions, they put you on a list and nobody sees your tweets. That's a problem, right?
Yeah, that is, yeah. And I just think people are tired of his sort of antics and they're wondering, what the next step for Twitter is, assuming he's going to leave.
Yeah, well, he probably will. So he'll get bored of it.
I think he will, yeah. And he has a lack of social skills, and that seems to reflect on Twitter as well. And I also think that he does tend to gripe and moan, and everyone thinks, well, you're the richest person in the world. Why are you complaining so much?
Sure.
Get off Twitter.
Oh, but you could have said the same about Donald Trump before.
Of course, about a lot of people that are CEOs.
Yeah.
But he has a platform that's very loud and very aggressive.
Yeah.
So, also, he went on he did go on stage with Dave Chappelle in San Jose doing a comedy show. Dave brought him on stage for 20 minutes a few months back.
Yes.
And the audience just booed him.
Yeah, but that was always going to happen.
Right, but it's because he didn't have an act. He's not funny. You're wrong about that. He doesn't have anything to say that's funny at all. Not live at all, nothing.
And Trump is funny.
Trump is hilarious.
Yes, listen, the reason most comedians hate Trump is because he's more successful and he's much funnier than them.
Yeah, he writes the jokes faster than we do.
Yeah.
OK, well, we're going to move on to this next question from Joel. Where is Joel? Hello.
Hi, does it matter that the fictional character Luke Skywalker is gay?
Well, it doesn't. No, I wouldn't have thought so. But this is actually a true story that was reported this week, that Luke Skywalker, of course, is the hero of Star Wars, is now listed among LGBTQ+ individuals on this authoritative Star Wars fan encyclopedia, which is called Wikipedia. Now, I looked into this, though, and it's not that Luke Skywalker is gay. It's that one sort of guy wrote a book in which he's gay, sort of tangentially related to the...
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I just feel bad for little gay kids like myself. When I was 7, I had a poster of him on my wall, and now they'll have to take it down because their parents could be like, why is that poster up? Right?
But he never was seriously gay.
My mom made me take down my Star Wars poster and put a poster of Raquel Welch in a bikini.
Really?
It made my nights alone in my bedroom last so much longer.
But Luke Skywalker isn't gay. He got off with his sister,
yeah, exactly. So he was hot. I mean, for me, it didn't matter if he was gay or straight. I just thought he was cute.
And also, Star Wars has already got the gay characters, the robots. Those two robots, they're gay. They're a gay couple.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, R2-D2, that is a homosexual robot.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's no way he's straight.
I mean, C-3PO is the camp one, and R2-D2 is the butch.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So R2-D2's the top, C-3PO's the bottom.
Yeah, we know.
I like the little one because he's the perfect height.
Yeah,
I like him. Yeah.
Exactly. And he's self-cleaning.
I'm going to put an end to this conversation and move on to this next question from Sarah. Where is Sarah? Hi, Sarah.
Hi. Are critics right in branding Harry Styles out of touch for saying people like me after his Grammy win?
Yeah, he obviously Harry Styles. He was in some boy band at some point, I think, and he got slammed for his Grammys acceptance speech. It was the Album of the Year award, and he said, "This doesn't happen to people like me very often, and this is so, so nice. Thank you very much." And people were furious because they were saying, "Well, wait, you're posh, white, male, straight. It does happen to." Are they right?
Well, I just like the fact that he said something so completely innocuous and people are still furious.
They're really angry about it. Yeah.
This doesn't happen to people like me. This is so, so nice, thank you. To me, that's a really lovely acceptance speech.
Yeah.
When you think about all the other horrible ones, and quite humble and quite, self-effacing, but people are still like, no.
He doesn't. I don't think he meant straight white males. Did
No.
he? I think I presume he meant people like me who were like sort of cheesy boy band stars.
Yeah,
I guess.
Isn't he also from like a one-parent family?
No idea. I don't know
from
who he
up
is
north?
really.
Yeah, and so it just shows that people are ready to be offended about it.
Okay, Scott. I mean, did he say anything upsetting to you?
I think he's reached the apex, and it's all downhill from here for him.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they've given him an award. Now they want him to shut up and get back in the studio.
Oh, you think it's just tearing down someone for his success?
Yeah, they love doing that. I mean, I don't know. I've never had that kind of success, obviously. But I think, there have been actors who've moved to the U.S. from here because they feel like now they're doing well, they're just going to be torn apart.
Yeah.
So.
Poor Harry.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to move to another one from Emma now. Where is Emma? Hi, Emma.
Hello. Should offensive statues be taken down at all?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about that on this show. Offensive statues being taken down. This is now about Vikings. Vikings could be connected to the far right, according to a police-backed audit of monuments linked to what they call oppressive behaviour. I would say Vikings are a bit oppressive. This is Northumbria Police. They took part in a review of statues and landmarks to establish which sites might be associated with slavery and other forms of oppression. This is according to documents seen by The Telegraph. And the audit decided that several sites related to Vikings could have associations with far-right symbolism. I think the axe does that have something to do with far-right symbolism or something? Or is it the fact that they raped and pillaged and did the rest of it?
It is, and also they had gender-critical views. And
Oh, did they? The Vikings?
Yes, they did.
Yeah.
They didn't understand, the whole trans spectrum. They didn't announce their pronouns when they came in to do a bit of raping.
I see.
It was all very problematic. You just can't have that, mate.
So Vikings, they have to go, don't they?
Vikings have to, they have to go. I think that apparently Hitler, who was apparently a Nazi,
Yes.
adopted some Viking symbolism, and so we've connected the two.
But that's not the Vikings' fault.
No, they've been gone for a while.
Exactly.
And I think that people wanted to attack the statue itself. If you've seen it, it's quite ugly, the statue. It's modern.
So you think it was aesthetic?
I think so. I think the locals were like, we'd like to take this down and put some flowers.
So it's just an excuse, really, to attack it?
The problem is flowers can be fascist, They can.
They can, absolutely.
Yes, they've got one opinion, they've got one bud, that's all you get.
Yeah, no, that's
Right?
fair enough. I just think when you're sort of trying to cancel Vikings, haven't you you've jumped the shark? Surely at that point.
I think they jumped the shark a while
Yeah,
back,
I think
mate.
so.
I mean, thank God for the Vikings. You're Irish.
Yeah.
Right?
What have the Vikings got to do with Ireland?
Because the Irish people look better.
Because the Vikings went there.
They pillaged and raped and made, spread
everyone
their
more
lovely
attractive.
seed. Well, God, before that, there's all cave dwellings and people with unibrows. Thank God for the
Can you
Vikings.
imagine English people without Nordic bone structure?
Seriously.
I mean, they just look like misshapen potatoes.
It's a nightmare. Thank God the Romans were here for a while.
Yeah.
I'm putting an end to this right now because we're teetering into xenophobia, sort of just leaning in very enthusiastically, I should say. Anyway, coming up on Free Speech Nation, fairy tales, Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty have been given a woke overhaul, and we're going to find out why in just a few minutes.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
As a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. A new storytelling app is retelling some of the classic fairy tales, such as Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty, as they are deemed inappropriate for this generation. The app, Tell, is set up by EastEnders actress Cara Toynton, and it regales the famous Cinderella tale. She turns down the prince's proposal because we hardly know each other. And Sleeping Beauty is not awoken by a kiss, and when asked by the prince what her wishes are, she replies, "Give me a minute, I only just woke up." Joining me is the founder and director of the Free Speech Union, Toby Young. Toby, I mean, not really a free speech issue, is it? But let's talk about it anyway. I mean, it's bizarre, isn't it, to try and sanitise these fairy tales, because a lot of them were quite grim and dark, and that's what kids liked about them.
Yeah, I mean, they are quite, in some cases, quite traumatising, you know, quite scary. And that is part of the point. That's, in order to achieve their effect, they have to be quite triggering, you know.
Yeah.
So to try and make them more anodyne, to try and render them safe, seems a little bit tone-deaf, and to betray a lack of understanding of what fairy tales mean and what their cultural significance has been over the past. I mean, some of them date back thousands of years. They were kind of written down, you know, sometimes in the 18th, sometimes in the 19th century, but they date back far beyond that,
yes.
So, you know, before we had books even. So the idea that somehow this distilled wisdom that's been passed down from generation to generation in the form of fairy tales can be improved upon by someone who's engaging in a bit of kind of woke censorship seems to be a little bit arrogant.
I don't think the kids will thank them for it. I mean, even reading more recent writers such as Roald Dahl, very dark, very sort of grim emphasis within those stories. The Witches is a very good example, you know, very scary stuff, and that's what kids sort of want. So if you sort of sanitise it in this way, I mean, really, what's the point? Where is this coming from?
I guess it's probably from a well-intentioned place. The idea that somehow fairy tales contain sexual and gender stereotypes, and that helps perpetuate gender inequality and prop up the patriarchy. So if we want to do something about those persistent injustices, we need to change fairy tales. I mean, I think it's sort of it's the same kind of underlying motive for attaching trigger warnings to James Joyce's Ulysses. I think that was the latest one this week.
Yeah.
Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream. The idea that language and the way we use language, the words we use, is responsible for the nature of our society, for things like patriarchy, for things like relations between the sexes, for long-standing stereotypes, as if you just tinker with a few words, ban a few things, and suddenly overnight you're going to transform the world. It is a bit politically naive.
That's very important as well, isn't it? Because obviously this is one of those frivolous stories, you know, people complaining about fairy tales being rewritten. It sounds silly, you know, it sounds like one of those old PC gone mad stories from the Daily Mail in the 80s. But actually there is a broader point to this, which is that a lot of people, culturally speaking now, have bought into the idea that popular culture basically tells the masses how to behave. You know, if you have a story that has a gendered stereotype, then all of a sudden boys and girls will start enacting those stereotypes. But I don't think that's been borne out by the studies into this.
No, and I mean, I think the far more influential are parents. The way parents bring up children, the values parents impart to children. You know, what they encounter in the home and beyond the home, in school and amongst their peers. Those are the kinds of things which form behaviour, affect people's values, you know, affect the way they turn out. The idea that changing a couple of words in a book, though, I mean, most children probably aren't even read fairy tales these days, even on an app. So it does seem a little bit kind of ambitious, a little bit optimistic to think you're going to change the world and somehow rid us of the patriarchy by changing a few words in a fairy tale.
There's also a problem that I have with this sort of thing, with this rewriting of existing stories, which I think is quite akin to what sensitivity readers do in the publishing industry, where they tweak things because they don't want things to be offensive. But isn't an element of art and the creative industries more generally that they can depict offensive scenarios and that kind of thing? I mean, I have a friend who's a novelist who's had to self-publish now because the sensitivity readers kept trying to clean up his villains, because his villains, who are serial killers, by the way, said some, you know, homophobic things or something. Well, serial killers aren't very nice.
Well, the odd thing about this, I mean, I completely agree. Of course, there have to be some disturbing, triggering things, even in children's stories, if they're going to achieve their effect. I mean, people complained about, you know, Harry Potter books. They now have trigger warnings attached. But unless children are actually frightened, albeit in a kind of controlled environment in the safety of their own homes, unless they make an imaginative leap and actually experience fear, they don't then learn how to overcome those fears by imagining themselves as the characters in the books confronting villainy and evil. I mean, they don't achieve their effect as classic works of children's literature unless the children are quite engaged and disturbed and frightened.
Yeah. Now, let's talk a bit about your free speech union, which, of course, is going great guns at the moment and is much needed, clearly, because things keep happening and people keep being cancelled. I've been talking to people tonight who that's affected. What is the free speech union focusing on at the moment?
So, at the moment, we're trying to persuade the government to press pause on a private member's bill the government is supporting called the Worker Protection Bill. And what this bill will do, it's gone almost completely under the radar, is it will extend liability for harassment from, at the moment, employers are only liable if an employee harasses another employee. So if an employee overhears a conversation between two other employees that they find upsetting in virtue of one of their protected characteristics, because they're a woman or because they're gay or because they're black, they can then sue their employer for not doing enough to protect them from overhearing that kind of upsetting conversation. Now, that's absurd enough, but under this new worker protection bill, that liability will be extended to third parties. What that means is that if employees overhear an upsetting conversation between customers at a restaurant or in a bar or in a pub, they can then sue their employers for failing to do enough to protect them from that kind of harassment. What this means in practice is that publicans will have to employ, you know, bouncer banters to police conversations in pubs. Restaurateurs will have to make sure that customers in the restaurant don't say anything that a member of the wait staff might overhear, which they might find upsetting.
This is obviously unsustainable, not least because when you overhear a conversation, you don't have the context of that conversation, and also that it's open to exploitation. Anyone could say, I heard something that I perceive to be homophobic, therefore I'm going to sue you and get lots of money out of it.
Well, that happens in the workplace all the time. I mean, the reason workplaces have become, you know, quite difficult places to be, quite unpleasant places in many cases, is because employers are now so obsessed with limiting their liability for being sued by employees if they feel harassed or discriminated against. This is why there's an ever-increasing list of words and phrases that employers don't want their staff to use. It's why they send them on unconscious bias training courses. It's poisoned the atmosphere in a lot of workplaces, and it's now going to poison the atmosphere beyond the workplace into leisure spaces, football stadiums. I mean, you know, if this new bill becomes law and it's sailed through the House of Commons last week with the support of the government. I mean, it doesn't have much further to go before it becomes law. If it becomes law, if someone in a football stadium says to a linesman, "Are you blind?" and a partially sighted steward overhears a fan say that to the linesman, the partially sighted steward could then sue the football club for not doing more to protect him from that kind of upsetting remark, which is upsetting in virtue of his protected disability.
So it's so obviously self-evidently absurd. Why would it fly through? Why is the government not aware? Is it just that they don't understand the implications of this?
So the rationale, I think the reason for it is because I don't know if you remember the President's Club dinner about 5 years ago in which a couple of journalists went undercover to work as waitresses, hostesses, at this big charity fundraiser in central London at the Dorchester Hotel. And they discovered that a lot of the men in attendance were harassing the waitresses. But there was nothing the waitresses could do. They couldn't sue the President's Club because under the Equality Act, you can only sue your employer if you're harassed by another employee, not by a member of the public. So the idea was to extend liability for sexual harassment from members of the public to protect, public-facing women in places like casinos.
So again, there's good intention.
So well-intentioned.
Yes.
And they did consult about extending liability for sexual harassment to third parties in this way. But having consulted about that, they've now decided, without consulting, to go way further and extend third-party liability for any form of harassment, not just sexual harassment. I think we could probably, everyone would think, well, that's fair enough. If a member of the public harasses a member of your staff, you should be doing something to protect them. But if it goes beyond that and includes things like overheard conversations that they might find upsetting or offensive, that's way beyond, and that's going to completely poison the atmosphere in pubs, restaurants, bars, up and down the country.
Unbelievable. Well, Toby, just quickly before you go, where can people find more information on the Free Speech Union?
They can go to our website, which is www.freespeechunion.org, or on Twitter they can follow at Speech Union.
Great. Toby Young, thank you very much indeed.
Exactly.
Next up on Free Speech Nation, America shoots down not one, not two, but 3 UFOs. And who better to discuss the seriousness of this than my comedian panellists? Back in a couple of minutes.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pearce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank,
fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Every week we dedicate this part of the show to the world of social media. So first up, it appears that the US has shot down a third unidentified object this week. Is anyone else scared? And this is the latest one over Canada. Take a listen to this from CNN.
Interesting. This is kind of unusual that these pilots saw different things, and that is sort of, I guess, adding to the mystery of all this.
Yeah, not even the pilots apparently were really able to identify what they saw. And just to take you back for a sec, on Thursday, the U.S. defense officials sent F-35 fighter jets up to try to figure out what this object was that was flying around near Alaska. Those pilots, we have learned, have given very conflicting accounts of what they actually experienced, with some pilots saying that the object interfered with the plane's sensors, other pilots saying that they didn't really experience that, other pilots saying that when they looked at the object, they could identify no identifiable propulsion system, and they did not know how it was actually staying in the air, cruising at that altitude of about 40,000 feet. So this has all added to the Pentagon's wariness of describing in more detail what this object actually is until they can get more information through the debris that they are recovering right now.
OK, so, Francis, are we being invaded by aliens?
Probably, mate, yeah.
OK.
But here's the thing. What hasn't gone wrong in the last couple of years?
Right, yeah.
You know, look at the bingo card. Aliens is the next one.
I guess. Would you be sad if it was aliens coming to get us?
I want them to shoot down more stuff. I'm terrified. What's going on up there?
Well, I know, but...
Shoot. Keep going. Keep firing.
I mean, that interview is a bit scary because they're talking about how none of the pilots were seeing different things, which sounds like some kind of alien technology that messes with your mind.
They shot down a drone, right? Are they all high? Yeah, it's a drone, obviously. They said it was unmanned, the size of a car. It was a large drone.
Oh, you solved it then? So
yeah.
It's just the Chinese.
Duh. But, you know, I honestly, the point of worrying, we send stuff over their airways all the time. It's mutual. So and in fact, this whole espionage mystery we're up against right now, it's just being played by the government. It's trying to distract us from what's really going on up there.
Well, I hope it is aliens and not Chinese spies.
Why? You like aliens?
I just think
it's
nice,
right?
The human race had their shot.
Are we done?
I think we're done.
All right.
So let's move on to other creatures. Anyway, next we're going on to last night's Brit Awards, which was, of course, the male-dominated Brit Awards.
Thank God.
Well, after it was made gender-neutral, it became male-dominated. So anyway, let's have a listen to singer Tom Grennan's question to fellow pop star Ellie Goulding about her breastplate outfit.
What?
Oi, don't I look good next to Ellie Goulding? I love what you're doing. They're your real boobs?
These are not, no, these are not mine.
Sorry.
I wish.
Sorry.
Mine are a lot further apart.
Oh, okay.
Sadly.
Okay.
I wish. Hello, everybody.
Hey, everybody.
Here we are.
We're here to present Best...
I mean, that's sort of at the level of... Do you remember when Sam Fox hosted the Brits with the guy from Fleetwood Mac?
Yeah.
It was just cringeworthy. That's bad.
I mean, that is really bad. That is somebody drunk in a student nightclub trying to chat up a girl, failing miserably. Except in this case, he did it to an audience of about 20,000 people and people watching at home.
Yeah, that's bad.
Yeah.
That is terrible.
Yeah. I don't think... Did they rehearse that, do you think?
No.
No.
If they rehearsed that,
well, I don't know.
They're not good performers.
Yeah, well, it just reminds me how difficult comedy is. It's not as easy as it looks, is it? But I think also, I think that she was taken aback a bit. She tried to play along, which was nice of her.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, no, she was trying to save the situation.
Yeah, she tried, yeah.
But, I mean, also, and that, of course, last night as well, Sam Smith turned up in his new outfit, and this caused a bit of a stir because lots of people were tweeting about this online. There he is. It's a kind of inflated... How would you describe it? A black inflated leather gimp?
Yeah, it's an inflatable gimp suit. And either that or it's a suit designed for the most incontinent of men.
Yeah. Okay. I think he's got a Ryanair flight. He's trying to sneak on luggage. The thing is, Bowie did that outfit about 40 years ago.
That's right. It's very similar to a Bowie one.
When I saw it, this was the first thing I thought.
This one looks a bit cheaper than the Bowie one.
Yeah.
A little bit. Yeah.
You must be worrying because if anyone gets a cigarette near that, that is going
it's
down.
Gone, isn't it?
It absolutely.
The thing is, I don't see why people are upset about it. I mean, it's just pop
stars
dressed in stupid ways.
Yeah.
Like Lady Gaga turned up in that outfit made of meat, didn't she, that year? You know?
Yeah, I like that outfit.
Yeah, so, you know.
I think he's just trying to gain press, which is what he's getting right now, right?
It's happening.
Yeah.
It's working.
Good for him.
OK, so anyway, we're going to move on now. We've got this final social sensation. It's an early adopter of MSCHF's now viral Big Red Boots has left people in hysterics after discovering that they are almost impossible to take off. And now, we're just watching this here. Someone attempting, with what looks like help from someone else, to take off the boot. What do you think of this, Francis? I mean, the idea of having an accessory that cannot be removed.
I mean, this is a sign that Western civilization is reaching its end point, isn't it?
Well, the fact that this went viral.
Yeah, no, it's the fact that people want to buy this and are willing to spend 350 quid on whatever it is on a plastic boot that you would see like on a Super Mario game.
Yeah, it's very sad. Listen, we do have to finish, but I think we just have time to go through one of your unfiltered dilemmas from home, and this one has come in from Amanda in Birmingham, and Amanda has said, I've quit my job at the same company so many times, colleagues have nicknamed me Boomerang. Now I've been offered yet another job back at the same place, but I'm yet to accept as I'm too ashamed. I could really do with the money as I'm now on benefits. Should I swallow my pride and take it, or retain the minuscule amount of dignity I have left? Thoughts, Scott?
She hasn't applied anywhere else.
She only applies to one company, apparently.
Right.
I mean, that's clearly what's going on here. I don't know what she should do.
Just have some dignity and...
it's too late for that.
Yeah, it is too late for that. Just take the job. No job has dignity.
Why just marry a rich guy? Don't babes do that all the time?
What, marry well?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's what they should do, absolutely. Anyway, look, that's all we've got time for tonight. Thanks very much for joining us for Free Speech Nation. This was the week when a Star Wars character came out as gay, God became a they, them, and Sam Smiths wore a balloon morph suit. Thank you to my panel, Francis Foster and Scott Caporo, and of course to all of my guests as well. And please, if you do want to join us live in the studio, then just apply. That website is online there at the bottom. See you next week. Farewell.
Good evening, my name's Rachel Ayres and welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. It's been quite a cloudy day today and that's not going to change too much as we head overnight, though it will remain dry for most. Now, all this settled weather is due to this high pressure that we've had across the UK for some time now. But as we head towards about midweek, we might just start to see some fronts creeping in from the west. But back to tonight, and it's quite a cloudy picture once again. We might see a few clear spells across northern and western areas through tonight, and here we could see some patchy mist and fog forming. Remaining dry though, as I say, and quite mild too, with only a patchy frost in some rural areas, particularly in the north and east. So quite a mild and cloudy start to the new working week, though as we go through the morning, that mist and fog will lift and break, as will the cloud, making for a much brighter afternoon. So plenty of sunny spells across the UK for the second half of Monday. Temperatures will be around or just above average for the time of year, with highs of around 10 to 12 in the south. Now looking ahead to Monday evening, and there'll be plenty of clear spells around through Monday evening. And this could lead to some mist and fog forming, particularly across East Anglia and South East England. Now looking further west, and cloud and outbreaks of rain will start to move in from the west as we head into the start of Tuesday. So a milder night here, but cooler in the east under clear skies, and it's here we could once again see a patchy rural frost. So a cool start in the east on Tuesday, but with plenty of sunny spells. Cloud making its way in from the west, just bringing some outbreaks of light rain and drizzle across northern and western areas to start Tuesday. And the weather isn't set to change too much throughout the rest of next week, although we might see some rain around midweek, and temperatures will remain at or just above average.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh yes, already depressed.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in my big opinion, the scandal of NHS waste. It's enough to make you sick. My Mark Meets guest is one of the most outspoken politicians in the country, Nigel Farage's former right-hand man at UKIP, David Campbell Bannerman. In the big question, is Tory MP Lee Anderson a hero or a villain? And in the news agenda with my panel, is vaping an antisocial nuisance? Is it time to stub out? E-cigarettes. Also, is Britain now vulnerable to foreign attack? And is swearing at the office a sackable offence? We'll get to all of that after the headlines with Bethany Elsey.
Mark, thank you. Good evening. Here's your top stories from the GB newsroom. The number of people who've been killed in the earthquakes that hit Turkey and Syria on Monday has risen to 33,000. Officials say the window for finding survivors is closing, but several children were pulled from the rubble alive today, including a 9-year-old boy who spent almost a week under a collapsed building. An appeal by the UK's Disasters Emergency Committee has raised more than £60 million in just 3 days. The Labour Party is urging the BBC chair to consider his position after MPs found he breached standards when applying for the role. A cross-party committee says Richard Sharp made significant errors of judgment when he failed to declare that he'd helped Boris Johnson to secure a loan when he was Prime Minister. Shadow Culture Secretary Lucy Powell is questioning whether he's still able to uphold trust and independence in the broadcaster.
I think this damning report, it really is an unprecedented report, means that Mr Sharp's position is increasingly untenable, and he really should now reflect on whether he's able to carry out that very important role as the BBC chair to uphold public trust and independence of the BBC.
Warrington police have launched a murder investigation after a 16-year-old girl was found stabbed to death in a park in Cheshire yesterday. Brianna Gay was found by members of the public with multiple stab wounds near Linear Park. Emergency services arrived, but she was pronounced dead at the scene. The force is looking to speak with two people described as a white man and woman. The chair of the Defence Committee is urging Rishi Sunak to boost defence spending due to threats of a new Cold War. Tory MP Tobias Ellwood told GB News we need more money to replace military equipment and deal with aggression from Russia and China. It comes after reports that some NATO allies are concerned about the UK's military readiness. And a high-altitude object tracked over northern Canada that officials say posed a threat to civilian aircraft has been shot down over Yukon territory. It's the third object to have been shot down over North America in the past week, which at least one top US lawmaker says is another suspected Chinese spy balloon. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says his forces will now recover and analyse the wreckage. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now, though, it's back to Mark.
My thanks to Bethany Elsey, who returns in an hour's time. Welcome to Mark Dolan Tonight. Busy show. In my big opinion, in just a moment, the scandal of NHS waste. It's enough to make you sick. In the big question, is Tory MP Lee Anderson a hero or a villain? We'll debate that with Anne Widdecombe. My Mark Meets guest is a man who's never short of an opinion or two, the former MEP David Campbell Bannerman, who was right-hand man to Nigel Farage at UKIP. And in the news agenda, is vaping an antisocial nuisance? Is it time to stub out e-cigarettes? Also, is Britain now vulnerable to foreign attack, given the problems that we've got with our defence? Is swearing at work a sackable offence? And does being nice get you anywhere in life? We'll discuss that later in the show. Reacting to those stories and many more, my fantastic panel tonight. The political editor of both the Sunday Mirror and the Sunday People, Nigel Two Jobs Nelson. The historian David Oldroyd Bolt. And the political and social commentator, Lynn May. Now, I want to hear from you throughout the show. Mark at gbnews.uk. This show's all about opinions, especially yours. And this programme has a golden rule. We don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. So for the next 2